title is for this Sunday's reflection is looking within, and just to give a perspective on this, the sense of looking and listening, or mindfulness, paying attention to, investigating, looking, penetration with wisdom. These type of words convey the way of the Buddha. Because the sensory world, when we examine it, is one that is constantly impinging on us, and so we tend to react to it. We tend to go outward, and react to what we see or hear, smell, taste, touch. Just the way our mind's conditioned to think, the views, the opinions, the attitudes, the values that we hold in our minds, we tend to react to life. And the emphasis usually is going outward into the world. The world is seen as something external. And that sense then leads to a very powerful feeling of being a kind of permanent soul or personality. It's very hard to think of ourselves in as not being, or in religious thought, a kind of immortal soul. There's a longing to preserve our uniqueness or our sense of individuality and personality in a concept of, say, immortality of the soul. And the soul is always defined as my soul, as opposed, or say in contrast to your soul. Each one of us has a soul, a personality, a sense of ourselves that we make assumptions from, and we carry on and act and live our lives with that assumption. And so this tendency, of course, leads to a feeling of loneliness, of isolation, of alienation. And so that one of the main human activities is to try to find union or reunion in one way or another, to kind of erase or to modify that sense of alienation and loneliness that we hold to and believe in because of the bodies we have as being separate entities, and the perceptions we have of ourselves, our souls, and even the reference to God as something external. We pray outward, or we think of God as up in the sky, or some external force, or power, or overriding, or all-pervading power, but it always has this appearance of being separate. So recognize that separation is what we're experiencing, the apparent separation of having been born and living a life within a individualized form, and relating to the world that we perceive, and to the universe that we live in, always through reacting to it in some way or another, having beliefs about it, theories, ideas, being either seeing it as something external and separate, recognizing it is a mystery, that it is a rather terrifying mystery, that the universe. So then when we talk about looking within, this is merely an expedient means to bring attention, say, from endlessly reacting to what we call the external world, to maybe paying attention and listening and observing the things that we actually think and feel, to the very rhythms of our own physical bodies, their sensations, their feelings, their rhythms. And even to the thoughts, to listen to anger or to greed or lust, to listen to fear and jealousy and desires of various forms, to listen, to observe, to look within. But this looking within in a way of listening, as the observer and the witness rather than the judge. Because we tend to make judgments about all these things. It's easy for us to pass judgment, isn't it? We come from a society where we make we're conditioned and encouraged to pass value judgments on everything, whether it's good, bad, better, best, worst, either what is external or what is internal. It's hard to do anything in a world where people are very critical and tend to make value judgments in kind of absolute, seemingly absolute ways. Something is absolutely the worst or the best. Isn't it? We tend to see ourselves and even make personal judgments in that almost kind of that assumption of being absolute. We are absolutely this way. Absolute, it implies a permanent, unchanging, fixed thing or value. So if we see anger in ourselves, we tend to think of ourselves as a personality which is angry. And this tends to get absolutized, fixed in the mind, in our perceptive mind, as me. I am an angry person. Coming from the United States recently, where I don't think these fads have taken such strong hold on the British yet, but they're coming. Watch out for the wounded inner child jargon. Because that's, everybody in America talks about their wounded inner child. And that becomes a kind of fixed, absolute view of oneself, because maybe your mother spanked you too hard, or maybe we have been wounded by our experiences in early life, by being abused or sexually abused or deprived of love or whatever, because life tends to be this way, isn't it? It's easy to abuse. And people that have children aren't necessarily always very wise, and sometimes don't even want the children they have. So to wonder that human nature tends toward, that we aren't more messed up than we are, considering all the human beings on this planet. But when we hold on to views of this kind, I am an angry person, or I am a greedy person, or I am a jealous person, or frightened person, or an abused, I was abused and this has ruined my life, or even the tendency to hold on to things like I am an alcoholic or a drug addict, or you see it with the gay communities, a fixation on being a gay person or lesbian. These kind of identities become absolutized into the mind. So then that definitely tends to influence how we relate to the world that we're living in. We see it always from a particular interpretation, a kind of filter, or a distorted angle of some sort. And these things are judged accordingly. Either they're exalted, they can be, we can exalt them, we can defend them. All these are forms of attachment and identity with these conditions. We can blame somebody else. It's your fault that I'm this way. Or because I was abused as a child, it was my wicked father or my evil stepmother or whatever, or the British way of doing things, the stiff upper lip, the public school. There's always possibilities for blame, and not that these things cannot be blamed. Sometimes we can blame them justifiably, but to absolutize, to hold to a view that somehow these experiences, unfortunate experiences of our lives, have ruined us, or they have, that we hold on to the memories and identify with those memories, then that definitely keeps us always within the realm of being life's victim. Because for the holy life, or the spiritual path, or liberation, enlightenment, none of these experiences or conditions are obstacles to enlightenment. So this is the kind of wonderful thing to realize, that no matter what has happened to you, how unfortunate it might be, or what you have done, and how many wrong things or foolish or stupid things you've done in your life that you hate yourself for, actually the only obstacle that is there is your absolutizing in memory and in perception and identification with those memories, so that it's the attachment rather than the condition itself that is the obstacle. Now this is for reflection, because we can see even like diseases. Sometimes you get an idea, you read certain books on religious experience and development, and you think you have to have this perfect diet, perfect kind of physical conditions, cancer and all these various diseases are obstacles, and bad posture and bad breath, whatever it is, that you have to kind of get the best of everything in order to realize, to be an enlightened being. There's this element of perfecting the body, perfecting all the chakras, perfecting the virtues, perfecting this and that. And so when we compare ourselves as a personality to the highest virtues and to the possibilities of perfect health and vigor and all that, then we feel not in this lifetime is enlightenment possible. And because there are very few people that have such an opportunity to have, say, perfect health and have lived a completely virtuous life. But in the actual understanding of Dhamma and the ability to understand through that transcendent awareness of the way things are, then we can learn to let go and to break up the identity and the assuming, absolutizing of these identities, to where then the mind is liberated from those distorted positions, and then there is the purity of the mind. That purity, that awareness that comes through the pure mind, pure intelligence, which is not conditioned, is not personal either. It's where memories arise and cease. Because to be a person, you have to remember things, don't you? You have to be attached to certain views about yourself, opinions. You have certain attitudes, maybe religious or philosophical attitudes that are conditioned into your mind. And you make assumptions, and assumptions are conditions of the mind. But in that awareness, or mindfulness, the mind is then pure and receptive, sensitive, intelligent. That is non-personal. That is not mine, it's not yours as such. It's what we all can abide in, what we can all take our refuge in, beyond, say, the differences of our appearance, our backgrounds, personalities, etc. So that is the experience of unity or oneness, or oftentimes referred to as the one mind. In that purity of awareness, the pure mind, or the one, there's no sense of alienation, because alienation and loneliness come through the assumptions about being somebody, being a man or woman, being a person. And those are conditions of the mind. So just to emphasize the difference between what is conditioned into the mind and the natural state of mentality. Now the ability to reflect in this way allows us to understand. To understand means that we are in touch with universal wisdom. Or universal wisdom, we connect to it, or we reconnect, or we remember. Because universal wisdom is not something you get, not something you acquire from a book or from a teacher or university or whatever. It's not wisdom about something that you must remember. It's not memory. It is say, here and now. It is available to be used at any time by all of us. Wisdom is something that is our right, our heritage to use when we open to it. We have to recognize how to let go of the old hang-ups, the obstacles, the obstructions, the hindrances, all the ignorant tendencies to hold on to these separative views and this assuming and absolutizing conditions as being oneself. Because that will always leave, that kind of, that habit, tendency, always creates you and me in a fixed way. When there's me as a separate person, and I believe in myself as a separate person, as a permanent personality, then the result of that belief, and that is a feeling of alienation. Now, I've watched this in myself. I've seen how frightened one can be, or threatened by life, or alienated one might feel, just through holding on to views about myself, about other people. Holding on, not that these views are wrong views, absolutely wrong. I'm not saying views are absolutely wrong, but views are views. They arise, they cease in the mind. They might be appropriate to a situation. They might be totally inappropriate. And to know the difference is what mindfulness and wisdom is all about. When a particular view is appropriate to the time and the place. But recognize the tendency to fix identities and to make judgments about oneself and about others. And to believe that that these are more than that, more than just a view. We can actually believe that a person, somebody we know is actually the view that we have. How many of you really totally convinced that your views about each other are the actual person, the real person? I think of how convincing it is to conceive of somebody, react to somebody, and then to hold on to that memory and say, that person is my memory. My memory is that person. And I can carry the memory around. The person can change, isn't it? Goes through all kinds of movements and changes, and can react very differently to other people. And maybe we catch each other on a bad day, or in a bad mood, or unfortunate situation, or maybe there's other karmic influences from previous lives, or the way we conducted ourselves in Atlantis those many thousand million years ago might influence a particular reaction we have now. At least the people who say they recognize or remember previous lives, as say oftentimes they assume, I've heard the story that the Sangha, the bhikkhus here and the nuns, we were all together on Atlantis and did something wrong, so we have to come together in this life. Let's hope we get it right this time. But whether those things are true or not doesn't make the slightest bit of difference. That isn't important about previous lives even, or character tendencies, or qualities that we might perceive each other with, but to recognize that they are just that. So that's like looking within and recognizing that my memory of you is just that. It's my memory of you. It's a memory. Memory is this way. And that ability to recognize and notice and see that a memory is, one thing you recognize that a memory arises and ceases in the mind. Well, where does it go when it ceases? There's some kind of storehouse in your brain. All these memories are kind of coded in various ways in your brain, and then they're kind of indelibly kind of registered and permanently there. Who knows? All we know is that when certain conditions arise, these memories come forth into consciousness. So this is the and when the conditions, the physical conditions are there, and other mental, emotional conditions, then certain memories will arise. Like deja vu memories, and we can feel we've been in places before that we know we have not been in this life. Or we can feel affinities with certain people, like we can feel very drawn, or some kind of strange familiarity, or certain connection to various individual people that we might just meet, that we've never met or normally met in this life. And then we can assume all kinds of things about previous lives, or affinities, or Atlantis, or Lemuria, if you want. But the thing that we can recognize is that these are conditions of the mind that we feel, affinities and strong connections, attractions, aversions, indifference, feelings of being threatened, or being dominated, or being despised. All these we can recognize by looking within as conditions of the mind. What arises ceases. Now that ability to recognize, to reflect, to observe is the purity of the mind, because in that awakened mind, in that awakeness, that mindfulness, then we're looking at the way it is, the pattern, rather than the quality. The pattern is the conditions arise and cease. The qualities are infinitely variable. Good, bad, wonderful, horrible, whatever. But all conditioned phenomena is something that arises and ceases. And we observe from within our minds, rather than we can reflect on it externally. As we see the changing, we begin to see it's getting on to autumn now. The leaves are beginning to turn. The trees look the leaves don't have the same green vibrancy they had a month ago, and so forth. We can see the changing conditions of nature that we witness through just our ability to see externally. But internally, we can observe the very quick movements of our minds and hearts, the feelings of getting high or low, of feeling threatened or worried or rejected or unappreciated or whatever we might be feeling. Just some of our feelings are beyond perception, and we have no perceptions for them. We don't know how to describe them. Some of the feelings and reactions we have are very subtle. So language, we don't have words that can accurately describe a lot of the feelings we do have. But we can still observe them as what arises and ceases. Now looking within can also be misleading in the sense that we tend to think these things are within us. That we tend to think of that everything is inside us, which still creates this illusion of in me and in my heart or in my brain or in my mind, because that whole illusion of being somebody who reacts to external impingement and we can also very strongly identify with the movements within our minds as being me and mine. And the inner world, my inner world, as opposed to someone else's inner world or the external world. But notice that the emphasis on Dhamma is to keep reminding yourself of the pattern of phenomena rather than identifying in any way with the quality of the phenomena, whether it's very enigmatic, very highly personal, unique, or common or ordinary, whether it's coarse or refined, good or bad, pleasant or painful. These are the qualities, but the pattern is the pattern of arising, ceasing. Listening, I've found, I'm a listener. Like one of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara that they use in the Mahayana system. One who listens to the sounds of the world, like Kuan Yin is a Chinese name for Avalokiteshvara. Listens to the sound of the world, and Avalokiteshvara, of course, is a symbol of compassion. Kuan Yin, usually in the Chinese system, is represented as kind of very beautiful female form, the kind of feminine goddess form that represents compassion. But Avalokiteshvara can also be in a male form. It's not particularly male or female as such, but whatever the artist or the one who wants to make the image feels about that, you put it into if it's in a male form, it's a very gentle male form. It's not masculinity as a warrior or as a kind of thunderbolt god. It is a gentle, almost androgynous male form or female form. Listening to the sounds of the world or to the universe. In Thailand, I remember where we're living in a tropical country, there's so much natural sound. I would listen just to the sounds in nature, to all the insect life in the jungles. So there's this constant buzzing going on in tropical jungles. And some of it's quite, I remember one monastery I lived in where a certain time of the year you'd get a kind of symphonies of insect music. Some of it was quite elegant and beautiful. In northeast Thailand you hear a kind of crescendo-like sounds of various insects, cicadas and different types of of little creatures that you could hardly ever get a glance at, but which could create very loud sounds. And at dusk, sometimes you'd sit there and just be enthralled by this kind of slow build-up of these various buzzing, chirping sounds into an enormous kind of loud crescendo, and then as it dissolves and disappears and then rises up again. Listening to the sounds. Then I began to, apply that listening to using Dhamma teachings, like noticing that sound itself changes, like you get like whatever you hear, whether bird sound or animal sound, human voice, whatever that noise might whatever that sound is, it's very fleeting, isn't it? You can't, where a sense of looking at a rock, you do have a sense of it being kind of permanent, because you can look at the rock, then you can go away for an hour and come back and look at the same rock. So you think the rock has a kind of solid, permanent quality to it, where sound always has this sense of immediate change. You can't hang on to a sound, well, you can, hang on to a rock. So listening is a term that I've often used to describe meditation. Listening to the sounds of the world, or listening to your own mind. So I would practice just listening. I'd hear the kind of negative states arising. I'd pay attention, just listening to the kind of irritation or frustration. I was listening to a lot of the negative feelings that I had in the early part of my monastic life. Listen to the compulsiveness of my mind. I detect it's kind of a sense of always having to do something. I'd listen to the tendency to feel guilty, to always to have this kind of obsessiveness about practice, because I was very determined to practice meditation, very sincere in my interest in Buddhism, but along with that sincerity and that interest was also a very powerful kind of compulsive tendency, obsession with practice. And that very compulsive obsessiveness would make me feel very guilty. And then feeling guilty, you'd feel you weren't working hard enough, you were too lazy, you were too weak. There was always a tendency to pass judgments. And then I'd make these absolute judgments. You're too weak, as if weakness was a kind of absolute problem with me. Underlying me was this kind of basic weakness that was there all the time. The way the conditioned mind can nag and complain and go on critically kind of accusing you of the worst possible things, but always in this mode of accusation, and as if this was what you were, what your real nature is this weakness or this obsessiveness, or you're a frightened person, or you're too greedy, you're too lustful, you're an angry person. Then somebody would, how the tendency to psychoanalyze. Somebody would come along and say, the trouble with you is that you've probably repressed anger. And then I've got to really get rid of this repressed anger. Or you read various books on modern psychology, and you'd get ideas about yourself being someone who who has to do something to get rid of something, who hasn't confronted something yet, who has to face up to something, has to do something in order to get rid of something. Underneath in this mind there's some latent horror that's waiting to come up, and you've got to do something about it. There is that fear. And some of the boring nights in monasteries in Thailand, you're sitting there bored out of your mind, wishing some of these latent horrors would come up and entertain you. At least it would be a little more exciting than what was going on. I began to realize latent horrors weren't really much of a problem. It was the tedium, the restlessness of the mind that tended to be the biggest deluding state. It wasn't the repressed anger or the unresolved bitternesses and negativity on any extreme level. It tended to be just a sense of those oftentimes seemingly good qualities, like working hard and wanting to get somewhere, and that compulsive way I would approach things, and the restlessness of my mind was the impatience. So I found like fear at night, or that sometimes one wished one could experience a few ghosts, or really terrifying situations to get out of the lethargy and dreariness that you could sink into in a life that was fairly monotonous, and where boredom was more of a problem than anything else. Because life is quite boring, isn't it? Ordinary life is daily life, just the routines of breathing and having to take care of one's bodily needs, preparing food and eating, and the whole kind of realm of most of our life. The quality of most of our life is neither a chamber of horrors or anything all that ethereal and ecstatic. It is just this way: sitting, standing, walking, lying down, breathing, getting up, sitting down, putting up with things, waiting in traffic jams, learning to be patient and watch your mind while you're stuck on the M25. Being able to just and I hear it like I read about the Soviet Union waiting in queues. What wonderful practice for meditation the Soviet government gives its people. One woman, I was reading yesterday about a woman that has to get up early in the morning and wait in a bread line for 3 hours to get a loaf of bread, and then go off to another line to get a sausage, wait more hours to get a piece of sausage. They're waiting for maybe free market economy when we don't have to wait for things, but then you have other problems, isn't it? The things it isn't in waiting really, but but life is really waiting for something to happen. The human realm is this way, isn't it? It has its moments, its very kind of brief moments of ecstasy and kind of excitement and wonder and the miracle and so forth, but so much of it is neither one nor the other, neither one extreme nor the other. So in listening inwardly, looking within, you become aware of this restlessness, this dissatisfaction, this complaining, this expecting, waiting for Godot, waiting for the traffic to move, waiting for the red light to turn green, waiting for the paycheck, or waiting for the promotion, waiting to die, waiting and putting up with just the dreary flow of what our human existence tends to present to us, and when we tend to react to it and absolutize it through perception. Now, liberation of the heart means that when we understand this realm that we're in, and it no longer deludes us in any way, then that very restlessness is dissolved. The dreariness, the boredom, the sense of having to wait, the discontentment, the complaining tendencies of the mind, that all can vanish and disappear when we understand it, when we know it, and and recognize it as merely that which arises and ceases. And the pure state of the human heart, then, or the mind, unconditioned, is bright and a joyous mind. Joy isn't a kind of, thrill of having a particularly happy moment where everything is just wonderful and you feel on top of the world. Joy is what springs from the mind when there is contentment. One finds joy with just being conscious and with very seemingly ordinary things, with what we tend to get bored with or be impatient with, which we don't even notice when we're waiting for the red light to change to green, or we're waiting for something to happen, or we're expecting something. And we in that very state of expectation and hope for something in the future, or dread, or being caught in just compulsive energies and obsessions, we can't really appreciate what we're actually witnessing and what's actually happening to us at this moment. We overlook what is close, what is a miracle, what is immediate, is overlooked. Looking what is here, you don't see that. You're waiting for something to happen that's not here. An idea in your head, a hope, an expectation. So then our lives do become banal and meaningless. Because even when we get what we want, it's still unsatisfying. Isn't it? It may be momentarily gratifying. We get one kind of moment of, whoopee, I've got it. I now have what I've always wished for. And then the next minute you think, so what? Now what do I have next? What will I get next? Because external things, achievements, awards, wealth, material things, or another person, all of these things that come to us will leave us, and when they come to us and we want them, then we have a moment of happiness. When we get something we want, we will feel that happiness at getting it, but also that kind of happiness is ephemeral and cannot sustain itself. Just look at the tendency now to go shopping. Ajahn Sumedho just came back from California, where he said that so many people spend so much of their time shopping. Because in California, here in Britain, I'm sure people do it also. But it's just these shopping centers, well, absolute kind of paradises of beautiful things, all displayed, and cafes and whatnot there, just to go in there, and you can get almost anything you want. And when you start looking for what you want, then your mind always is looking for something. You're always looking and seeing which is better, which is prettier, what do you want more, what is the best, what can you afford. The mind is always concerned with the object, and then you get it, and then you enjoy it for a moment, and then the mind will want something else. go on to the next thing. So many people deal with their boredom, their restlessness, through shopping. And the capitalist system, the free market world, provides us with all kinds of interesting gimmicks and permutations and variations on all kinds of things to keep us, going on to the next thing. You always have a new thing, something that has just been invented, or some new fad or fashion to keep us interested in going on to the next thing. But when you take that to its logical conclusion, you end up with nothing, don't you? Maybe you end up with a lot of things that you don't want, but with nothing. You just fed your restlessness, your unhappiness, your fears. Where looking, listening within allows these things to be resolved. And that need to always get something else, to go out and look for something, or to feel there's something missing, something lacking. How many of you feel that there's something not right about yourself yet, or there's something wrong with you? There's something missing. That's a very common feeling, isn't it? Like there's something I have to do. There's something wrong with me right now. I've got to get it right. And I've got to do something. I don't quite know what it is. I don't think I can become a monk or a nun. But I should do something. I should maybe become a monk or a nun. But I don't want to go that far. There's this sense of having to, there's something wrong, incomplete, unsatisfied now. And you can listen to that feeling in yourself. It's not to make any judgment, just to know that feeling of being discontented, or that there's something incomplete about you. Just to get to know that feeling. And I'd even bring it up in my conscious mind by thinking it out quite intentionally, like, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. It's incomplete. I've got to do something. What have I got to do? And I keep thinking, bringing it up and listening. And that ability to listen, see, that listening, that ability to be aware of that condition, more and more the condition loses its significance. If you really bring it into full consciousness, to where it no longer has the high emotional charge in your life. You're not giving it so much power and so much importance. You're actually just, it's coming in you, and no matter how strong the feeling might be, as you keep thinking it over and over and listening to it, it loses its kind of importance and its urgency and its power to influence your mind. And what remains is just an empty thought. There's something wrong with me. An empty thought, but there is also that awareness of it as a thought. And that awareness, that ability to observe and listen and be awake, that is your true refuge. Because there's nothing wrong, there's nothing missing in that. When there's mindfulness, in that state when you are that way, when you're trying to become somebody who's mindful, forget it. You go around in circles. That's the story about stubbing your toe, isn't it? Trying to walk mindfully, you stub your toe. And then you think, well, I was being mindful. I was trying desperately to be mindful. I keep stubbing my toe. And I think, how can I do that? But it's not, you aren't being mindful. You're trying to become mindful. You're not being mindful. Mindfulness was not there. It was you're somebody who thinks you have to be mindful. And that very thought makes you heedless. So you can't see what's in front of you, the stump sticking out of the ground there in front of you, you don't even see it because you're trying so hard to become somebody who's really paying attention. And therefore we tend to not see, to not be aware, not be sensitive to what's actually right here and now in front of us, affecting us at this moment. I remember thinking in my early monastic life about listening to sounds in the jungles, and then I would, if there's something that I could hear or see that was really permanent, and I began to notice that there's what I call the sound of silence, or the kind of cosmic sound, the background sound that one hears as your mind goes towards silence. And that sound of silence I began to concentrate on. And then I'd lose track of it sometimes. When I get carried away with my feelings and desires, I'd forget about it and get caught up in, I've got to do this, I've got to develop my samadhi, I've got to get rid of this anger, I've got to practice more, I shouldn't sleep so much, I should make myself work harder, and the compulsiveness, all the kind of things that you're pushing and prodding and nagging yourself with, the tendency to always think there's something more to do. But when all that when that would reach its kind of peak and collapse, the compulsiveness, the compulsions would kind of stop after a while, then you'd be aware of this kind of ringing cosmic sound, like in your ears. I thought maybe it's some kind of insect. Or I thought it was tinnitus. Maybe I'm getting tinnitus, or this buzzing in my ears is some kind of. Somebody told me it's probably your veins or your something, structural. But whatever it was, I began whenever I brought my attention to that cosmic sound or sound of silence, there'd be the thinking process would cease. When I wasn't just going from one thought to another, there was an awareness there of this restless kind of compulsive physical feeling of compulsion. I became very much aware of this sense of just the body in this state of wanting, of tenseness or prepared, thinking that it should be doing something. And also this compulsiveness very much is a very physical feeling that we develop. And when I became aware of that, then that feeling would also drop away, that compulsive physical feeling, that tense physical sense of having to do something, that would cease. And what remained was a clear mind, a mind that was clear, bright, wasn't in ecstasies, wasn't kind of flying high in the ethereal world, but I was with the way life is, and able to respond, able to reflect, to contemplate in that state. So I developed a practice around the sound of silence, because whatever it is, it is a more permanent sound than any of the others. I don't want to absolutize it or make anything, make too much of it. But it is, we use what we have. We can use these things as reference points in our practice to bring our attention, say, like with the thinking mind, where you go so much from one thought to the next, associative thinking or the wandering mind. If I would start listening to the sound of silence, then I could, the thinking mind would stop for a while. And that would give me perspective on the mind without thought. There was awareness, consciousness. It wasn't, like I was unconscious. Still conscious, but non-thinking. And become so aware, then identify and notice. And that emptiness of mind, with the non-thinking, the mind without thought, and train myself more and more to abide in that non-thinking, to counterbalance the tendency of the overdeveloped obsessive thinking patterns that I had. So there was the thought and non-thought. Just like when you're looking inward and you begin to see, you begin to notice, here your thinking mind naturally in a way, it ceases, non-thinking mind is this way. There's the sound of silence. Consciousness, the silent is a stillness, a silence, a kind of vibrating silence. And then the thoughts come and goes. The things, you have perspective. Then, don't you? You have developed insight onto that very pattern, universal pattern of conditioned, unconditioned, mortal, immortal, space and form. I like to, in the perennial philosophers, there's these various philosophers, modern philosophers, and they're kind of in the Plato and the Neoplatonists and so forth of the past, and in this realm of say the perennial philosophy, the pattern that is always emphasized is just this basic, the conditioned relating to the unconditioned, the mortal to the immortal, the impermanent to the permanent, the relative to the absolute. And these can be lifted up high into ethereal kind of macrocosmic terms, or terms of that convey something much more than what we can actually notice within the restrictions and limitations of our human state. So in Buddhism, if you really begin to study and practice the Buddhist teachings, you begin to he would bring this pattern, universal pattern, into conscious experience within the limitations of our individual human state. So we listen, like listening to the sound of silence, or watching the space, using visual consciousness, using the ability to see, but contemplating the space in the room, or the sound of the silence, the background to sound, and then relating that to forms in space that we see, or to sound that comes and goes, and contemplating, pondering, reflecting on that pattern till that is thoroughly comprehended and understood, so that is something that we have a profound insight into. It's no longer theoretical knowledge. It's no longer just imagery, but we have to recognize it in the kind of ordinariness of our conscious experience, like with just the space in this room and the forms in it. Not saying that space is absolute, the absolute, or that the sound of silence is the absolute in some kind of ultimate way, but it's relatively absolute. In other words, it's good enough to get to study the pattern and to have a profound insight into that pattern of the arising and ceasing of the conditioned realm and the unconditioned, the unborn, uncreated, immortal. Then from that insight we break through the identity with the mortal, because each one of us tends to fix on a mortal identity, don't you? On your body, on your memories, on the things around you, your perceptions, conditioning of your mind. That's what you hold to as yourself. You're attached to death, in other words. You have fixed your identity onto what is impermanent. And that's why we are so discontented and unsatisfied in life. Because we identify, we hold to things that are basically unsatisfying and can never satisfy us. Expecting some kind of demanding that they do satisfy us. Please satisfy me. I want £1 million. That will satisfy me. But I know that if somebody just said, here's £1 million, I would not be satisfied. Because satisfaction, £1 million, the perception of me having £1 million would lead to more complications and more sense of more problems, more difficult situations would arise, more fears. Because the conditioned realm is not our real home. And as long as we insist on identifying and hanging on to death as our identity, but that's not what you really think you're doing, is it? You think you're holding on to life. No, you think, I'm not holding on to death. I don't want anything to do with death. I want eternal life, youth, happiness, good time, security. But all these attitudes, these perceptions, these values, these identities are really basically death-bound, isn't they? They arise and they cease, they come and go. So that's when we fully appreciate that and understand that, then our identity, we need to identify ourselves in any mortal way, with any condition whatsoever, becomes absurd. There's no need. It's no longer something that we seek or want or have any feelings about, other than we recognize how pathetic it is, how sad that people do that they seek their identities with what is basically unsatisfactory and death-bound.